Hey folks, welcome back to another Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at Effortless, Prepping for Adventure, which is brought to you by Barn Made Games. It's for 1 to 5 players, ages 10 and up, and games generally run about 20 to 40 minutes. From an early age, you gazed in awe as intrepid warriors journeyed through your quaint, slumbering hamlet. Against your parents' instructions, you stealthily observed them, acquiring a few clandestine skills during their fleeting visits. Now the moment has arrived to transcend your abilities and forge the path of legendary adventurers, leaving your mark on places far and wide throughout the realm. Effortless is a lightweight worker placement game with elements of set collection and a dash of take that. On your turn, you will place a cube, otherwise known as effort, at one of the 6 locations, which were randomly selected during setup, and then add a card to your growing hand. Once all players have exhausted their effort, they will gain greatness based on those cards in their hand and where they have applied their efforts. Due to a randomized setup, no 2 games will be the same. From a hidden coliseum to an airy market, where will your next adventure take you? And can you make becoming the greatest feel effortless? Now, I'm set up here with both of the expansions. We've got Altered and Hunted that we're going to be taking a look at briefly, as well as I have the upgraded player boards. So keep that in mind as you take a look at this preview, but the locations that you'll be visiting within the middle are going to be randomized, and attached to them is the settings. And in general, you have ones that match, like the Peaceful River, but you could mix and match the settings with different locations however you see fit. You could totally make it random, so suddenly the river could be a lively river. So lots of different directions how you could take this, and truly how you mix and match really changes up the game each time. Also, on the bottom right corner of the locations, you'll see icons that show how many cards go next to it. If it's black, it's going to be face down. If it's gray, it's face up. So you'll put those cards into play for setup, and every time you take one of the cards, you'll put a new one out there. So in this game, again, your cubes are known as effort, and in general, you're going to have 20 of these, and when you spent your last cube, that's going to be the end of the game, and so forth. Now, there's some variation in a 5-player game, but in general, you'll have 20 cubes to spend, so spend them wisely. Now, in the base game, not looking at the expansions, you're simply going to have your cubes, your locations, and settings. So, on your turn, you'll simply place a cube at that location, take a card, and replace the card, obviously, as well as perform the action that it says. Now, there's so many different things that could happen here. It might tell you to discard a card from another location, or you might be moving your effort or a player's effort across the different locations and maybe messing up their plan for scoring at the end of the game. Now, the settings you need to keep an eye on because there's lots of different ways to score. Some say that you need to have the majority at a location, or you just need to have a certain number at a location in order to get those star values. Or if you have too many, you might get a negative value. Lots of different directions I can go. And the expansions enter in some very different ways to score and get cards at the end of the game as well. So that's really how you play the game. You place an effort, you get a card, and you move on from there, trying to get points and get cards to score at the end of the game. So let's talk about cards. You're trying to get set collection, and a lot of the things you're doing. First and foremost, we have armor. So you can have potentially 4 pieces of armor giving you 13 points. 1 piece of an armor will give you 1 point, 2 pieces 4, and 3 is 8. So getting those collections of armor is a great way to get points at the end of the game. There are also item cards that you can get that are going to do various types of point values as well, but they're going to require that you have cards of attribute types, things like strength, wisdom, or dexterity in order to fulfill the requirements of that item. Now, you can have multiple items and have the same attribute cards to use across all those different items. So it's not like you have to have a set of cards for one item and then another set for the other. So it gives some really nice scoring possibilities at the end of the game as you acquire those cards. And those attribute cards are going to be scoring at the end of the game as well in each of the 6 categories. So if you have the most strength, you're going to be able to score those cards and add those points to your total. And some of the attributes are going to be worth 2 points. So it is a great way, obviously, to get ahead and get even more points at the end of the game. But obviously you cannot be the champion in all of those attributes. So you need to pick wisely which ones work for you and what you're trying to do with those different item cards. And it's very important to note that each of the attributes, even if they're worth 2 points, that doesn't mean you have 2 cards to apply to an item. You actually have to have cards for each of the requirements it calls for on those item cards. But it is a different way of scoring at the end of the game, using the cards in one way and then another to get multiple points. So really, those are the basics of what's going on here. Lots of different things that can happen about which locations you have in play and which cards you're going to be using and which expansions you're using. So Altered, this changes up the game quite a bit. My favorite of the expansions. This one gives you asymmetric abilities for your characters. So your characters will be made up of a race and a class, just like you'd expect. So here we have a gnome barbarian. Lots of fun things that can happen with the different races and classes and so forth, but you'll see that you have attributes built into your character. And you'll be strong in some and weak in others, maybe even negative points. So you'll know what type of card that you want to get for in-game scoring, which this will add to at the end of the game. Now your class abilities are going to do wide and varied things, like the Barbarian is going to allow you to add tokens to give you more effort in a location. And they're going to all do very different things based on how you use them in their classes. I like the Merchant one because that gives you discounts for all the items that you collect in your hand. Also, in this Altered expansion, you'll have new cards like experience cards. Once you have experience cards in hand, you can assign an attribute to them and apply them to your item cards to help you fulfill those sets. There's also new locations and new settings doing very different things. So mixing and matching with the base set is a great way to encounter these new locations and settings for sure. And then we have Hunted. Now, this involves threats, and you'll see here along the line of the locations and settings, you have a bunch of vacant threats, and there'll be one threat in play. You'll roll the dice to place it in setup. Now, that threat isn't active yet. At the end of every round, you're going to be rolling dice to see which threat becomes active, or if any new threats come out to play. So again, at the end of the round, you're going to be rolling dice to see perhaps if a new threat comes into play or if you activate a threat that is already out there. If you do activate one, then all players get a chance to attack this threat. Each of the threats is going to have 10 points of health in most games. In a 5-player game, though, they have 8 points of health. And you're trying to do that amount of damage or more in order to get greatness points and add them to the main board. Once you do that, you'll discard that card and eventually perhaps another threat will come out. But let's take a look at these threats. So you have their weakness. The first 3 icons are their main weakness. So for every effort cube you have in play and for each of the card types, you will get damage points against them. Now, if you have item card 14 for the imp, you'll get to do 3 points of damage. That is their critical weakness, trying to defeat them. And in general, each player who defeats this imp is going to get 2 points of greatness. But if you're the only player to do so, you'll get 2 bonus points, giving you 4. So lots of different ways to score with these threats for sure. And you definitely want to get in on that action when you put this expansion into play. I really liked it as well, but I think adding in the classes and the races is my favorite for sure. But it just gives you more ways to play. And of course, with the threats, you're going to have new cards known as Grit, which give you more ways to attack and do damage to creatures. Also, new locations and new settings that you're going to be going up against, and it just gives the game even more depth. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen has been in prototype form, so keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, this game also offers a cooperative way to play, where you're all working together to get fame, which is a little bit different, and it gives a nice twist in how you play. But the competitive, I feel like, is the heart of the game, as you're going back and forth trying to collect the sets and do the various things in order to get points. So I like the choices that are available to you about which sets you collect, which attributes you go for, what items you gather, and of course armor can give you some nice boosts as well in points. So getting the right number of cubes on the different locations in order to score there as well, getting those star points or greatness points that you'll be calculating at the end of the game. I like the set collection going on here for sure. Lots of neat things. The artwork is great. It has a good feel, a real nice flow to it as well. As you play, games move very quickly and it is super easy to teach, especially if you start off with the basic game and then introduce the different expansions one at a time. You can really bring people up quickly into the full game. And I definitely liked it with the expansions just because it adds that much more depth. But for maybe younger players, you would just start with the basics. But folks, ultimately, if this looks like something of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it for me. And until next time, we'll see you at the table.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.